The music didn't fade. It stopped, surgical. The skyline behind them glowed in electric blues and neon reds, skyscrapers piercing the night like jeweled crowns. The city pulsed beneath the rooftop terrace, powerful, alive, indifferent. But inside that space, the air shifted. 1 second the rooftop was filled with laughter, crystal glasses clinking, a saxophone sliding through a smooth jazz riff, Preston mid-sentence with his arm draped confidently around his fiancée. And then, silence. Not gradual. Not awkward. Preston's laugh lingered half-formed in his throat. His smile froze in place, wide and polished for investors, friends, cameras. Then the elevator doors opened. Soft. Precise. A sound that should have been ordinary. It wasn't. 3 men stepped out first. Dark suits. Earpieces. Stillness in their posture. They didn't scan the room nervously. They assessed it. Behind them, he stepped forward. Measured. Unhurried. No flashy entrance. No raised voice. Just presence. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention. It absorbed it. A champagne flute slipped from someone's fingers and shattered against the tile. No one reacted. Because everyone was staring at him. The skyline lights framed his silhouette, sharp suit, controlled stride, eyes that didn't wander. They selected. Calculated. Chose. An older investor near the balcony rail went pale. His voice cracked to a whisper. That's him. Not loud enough to echo. But loud enough to spread. Like a spark touching dry paper. That's him. Across the terrace, conversations died mid-breath. Phones lowered. Spines straightened. Preston swallowed. Just slightly. Barely visible. But the camera would catch it. His hand dropped from Claire's waist. He forced a smile, the same confident smile he'd been wearing all evening. It didn't reach his eyes this time. He stepped forward. Casual. Performative. You must be. The man didn't respond immediately. He scanned the room once. Just once. And in that single sweep, something terrifying happened. Power rearranged itself. Naomi stood near the balcony's edge, emerald dress catching the city lights, clutch in hand. She hadn't moved when the music stopped. Hadn't turned when the whisper spread. Hadn't even looked toward the elevator. Her posture remained elegant. Still. As if she'd been expecting this. As if the shift in oxygen levels didn't surprise her at all. Preston's voice faltered. You must be Naomi's. The man's eyes landed on him. Not angry. Not loud. Just certain. And in that certainty was something far more dangerous than rage. Recognition. Not of Preston. But of position. A second investor leaned toward another. You don't understand, he murmured. If he's here. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Because everyone in that room understood one thing instinctively. This wasn't a guest. This was gravity. Preston laughed lightly, trying to reclaim rhythm. Well. We weren't expecting. Naomi finally turned. 37 minutes earlier. The rooftop glowed like a private constellation above the city. Glass railings reflected neon towers in the distance. Soft gold lighting washed over marble tiles. Servers moved in careful choreography, balancing silver trays lined with champagne flutes. A live saxophonist played something smooth and expensive, the kind of music designed not to be listened to, only absorbed. This wasn't just an engagement party. It was a performance. Preston stood at the center of it. Navy suit tailored too perfectly to be accidental. Cufflinks catching light every time he lifted his glass. His laugh, loud, confident, deliberate, cut across the rooftop as if he owned not just the terrace, but the skyline beyond it. He moved through investors like a politician before an election. Handshakes. Shoulder pats. Strategic jokes. Subtle name drops. He closed that deal in 12 days. Triple valuation in 1 quarter. Visionary, someone muttered. Preston smiled modestly. He loved that word. Visionary. Beside him stood Claire, silver satin dress, posture straight, smile precise. She touched his arm lightly when she laughed, as if rehearsed. Her elegance was polished, curated, socially approved. Together, they looked inevitable. Across the elevator lobby, the doors slid open again. Naomi stepped out. For half a second, she considered stepping back inside. The music drifted toward her. Laughter spilled through the doorway. The skyline stretched behind the glass walls like a reminder of how small people could look from far enough away. She inhaled slowly. Emerald silk fell effortlessly around her frame. Hair pulled back into a low, sleek bun. Diamond studs, understated, intentional. A gold clutch in her hand. She did not look like someone who had been left behind. But rooms don't always care how you look. They care who claims them. And tonight, this room had already chosen its center. Naomi stepped forward. Conversations didn't stop immediately. But they shifted. Glances. Quick assessments. Recognition. There she is. Preston saw her within seconds. Of course he did. His smile widened, not surprised, not uncomfortable. Anticipating. He handed his glass to a server and began walking toward her before she could reach the bar. The crowd noticed the movement. A circle naturally formed. Not tightly. Just enough to observe. Naomi, Preston said warmly, arms opening slightly as if greeting an old friend. I wasn't sure you'd come. His tone was light, but calculated. Naomi offered a small smile. Congratulations, she said simply. Claire approached beside him, her heels clicking softly against marble. Oh, we're so glad you're here, Claire added sweetly. It takes strength to show up to things like this. A few nearby guests chuckled. Not loudly. Just enough. Naomi's expression didn't change. She nodded once. It's a beautiful venue. Preston grinned. It is, isn't it? Funny how things work out. Sometimes what feels like a loss ends up being alignment. Another ripple of laughter. Polite. Measured. Investors love metaphors about alignment. Preston tilted his head slightly. So, he added casually, how have you been? I heard you've been busy. The pause before busy lingered. Implied. Naomi held his gaze. I have. And your husband? Claire asked gently. Will he be joining us? There it was. The test. Naomi adjusted her clutch slightly. He lands at 8. Preston raised an eyebrow. Oh? Cutting it close. A guest behind him whispered something about private flights. Preston heard it. Smiled. Is he in finance too? He asked, voice projecting just enough to pull others closer. He works. The city lights reflected in the glass, blending skyline with her silhouette. Below, traffic moved like veins carrying life through concrete arteries. Her reflection looked calm. Untouched. But reflections lie. She checked her phone discreetly. 7:23 p.m. 37 minutes. Behind her, Preston's laughter swelled again as he recounted a deal, a story edited for applause. Claire nodded at the right beats. Investors responded predictably. Preston thrived on visibility. On narrative control. On rooms that applauded on cue. He believed momentum was ownership. He believed charm was immunity. And tonight? He believed he was untouchable. The saxophone shifted keys. A server refreshed glasses. Preston clinked his fork lightly against the flute, testing the sound. Give me a few more minutes, he called playfully. Then we'll make this official. The crowd buzzed in anticipation. Naomi didn't turn around. 7:24 p.m. Her husband lands at 8 o'clock. And the room still had no idea what that meant. The rooftop had warmed. Not in temperature, in tone. Champagne had moved from cautious sipping to confident refills. The saxophone's rhythm grew bolder. Laughter carried farther now, drifting toward the skyline like proof of belonging. And Preston stood at the center of it. Again. He had drawn another circle. Investors. A junior partner. 2 college friends who remembered him before the tailored suits. Claire at his side, hand resting lightly against his arm, the image of polished partnership. Naomi remained near the balcony, slightly removed but still within view. Preston glanced at her once. Then began. "You know," he said casually, swirling his drink, "growth is a strange thing." That was how he did it. He never attacked directly. He philosophized first. The crowd leaned in. "When you were younger, you mistake intensity for compatibility," he continued. "You think passion equals progress." A few chuckles. One investor nodded thoughtfully. Preston smiled, the humble visionary again. "But eventually," he added, "you realize you need someone who can run at your speed." Claire squeezed his arm gently. The symbolism was deliberate. The circle tightened. Someone asked, "Is that what happened?" Preston exhaled softly, as if reluctant to share. "I don't speak badly about people," he said, which was always the prelude to doing exactly that. "It just became clear we wanted different things." He gestured vaguely in Naomi's direction without looking at her. "Some people are comfortable. Safe. Routine. A pause. And some of us," he smiled lightly, "aren't built for small." A ripple of approval. The kind that doesn't sound like laughter, just agreement. Naomi's grip tightened slightly around her champagne flute. But her face remained composed. Preston continued. "I need momentum," he said. "Ambition. Someone who thrives in pressure." Claire tilted her head, playing the role beautifully. "And who supports you," she added softly. Preston nodded gratefully. "Yes. Support matters." There it was. The reframing. Not incompatibility. Deficiency. A younger guest near the back whispered, "Wasn't she in consulting?" Preston heard it. Briefly, he replied. "But some environments are demanding." The implication hovered. Unstable. Overwhelmed. Couldn't keep up. Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose. Doors opened before hands reached them. Conversations lowered when he entered. Authority without announcement. She remembered the way executives adjusted their tone when speaking to him. The way seasoned negotiators listened more than they spoke. Power didn't flex around him. It aligned. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. Back to the rooftop. Back to Preston's voice. He had grown more animated now, emboldened by audience approval. "You know," he said, addressing a small group again, "relationships are like investments. You either scale together, or you dilute." A man laughed loudly. "Dilute." Preston grinned. "I chose to scale." Claire beamed beside him. Naomi didn't react. That unsettled him. He wanted something. A defense. A correction. Emotion. Instead, she stood still against the skyline, composed, unreadable. He felt the need to push further. Just slightly. "So tell me," he called again, louder this time, ensuring full attention, "how did you two meet?" Naomi paused. "We were introduced." "By?" "A mutual interest." "What kind?" She held his gaze. "Strategic." A flicker crossed his face. The word didn't land the way he expected. A nearby investor cleared his throat quietly. Preston felt it, the subtle shift. He needed to reclaim it. "Well," he said brightly, clapping once. I'm glad everything worked out. Truly. Growth is good for everyone. Applause followed. Light. But public. He had framed himself as gracious, magnanimous, victorious. Naomi lifted her glass slightly in acknowledgement. She did not drink. The saxophone player shifted tempo again. The sky deepened into darker indigo. A server refreshed Preston's glass. He leaned closer to one investor. You know, he murmured, thinking she was out of earshot, some people just aren't built for velocity. The investor chuckled politely. Across the terrace, Naomi's reflection in the glass remained steady, unshaken. The city lights blinked rhythmically beneath her. She reached into her clutch. Her phone screen illuminated softly against her palm. 7:41 p.m. She checked the time. 7:48 p.m. The sky had darkened into a deep, polished blue. The skyline shimmered harder now, sharper lights, longer reflections, glass towers blinking like silent witnesses. The rooftop felt smaller. Not physically. Socially. Conversations had tightened into clusters. Laughter came quicker but thinner, like something forced to keep momentum alive. Word had spread quietly through the investors' circle. Naomi's husband was in acquisitions. Entire boards. The phrase lingered. Unresolved. Preston felt it. He felt the slight shift he couldn't quite name. The hesitation in a senior partner's tone. The way one guest asked, too casually, which sectors? He didn't like ambiguity. He liked control. So he decided to reclaim it the only way he knew how. 7:51 p.m. 9 minutes. Naomi adjusted her bracelet. Her pulse steady. Across the terrace, two older investors exchanged a look. One of them subtly checked his own watch. Preston noticed. He didn't like that. So he escalated. Actually, he said suddenly, voice rising slightly, this reminds me of something. The crowd turned again. He was about to tell a story. He loved stories. When Naomi and I were first talking about expansion, he continued, I remember suggesting we double our exposure. Bigger offices. Bigger clients. Bigger moves. He chuckled. She said it was risky. A few sympathetic murmurs. I told her, he went on, smiling wider now, if you can't keep up, just say that. The line hung there. Too direct. Too pointed. A handful of guests shifted uncomfortably. Claire squeezed his arm gently, a subtle signal to soften. He didn't. Because he felt momentum building again. Naomi didn't react. Didn't defend. Didn't flinch. And that silence became the most powerful thing in the room. 7:53 p.m. 7 minutes. The wind lifted slightly across the terrace, brushing silk against skin, shifting napkins, cooling flushed cheeks. Preston leaned closer to her, lowering his voice just enough to feel intimate, but still loud enough to carry. So, he said quietly, I'm glad you landed somewhere stable. Stable. Another coded word. Naomi met his eyes. You always confuse volume with velocity, she replied calmly. A flicker. Small. But sharp. A nearby guest exhaled softly. Preston laughed quickly to cover it. Still witty, he said. That's good. He stepped back, reclaiming physical space. But something had slipped. 7:55 p.m. 5 minutes. The skyline seemed brighter now. The terrace quieter between bursts of conversation. Preston raised his glass again. All right, he called, voice cutting through the rooftop air. Let's gather in 5. I'll make this official. Applause. People began repositioning subtly toward the center. Claire adjusted her ring so it caught the light. Naomi checked her phone discreetly. 7:56 p.m. 4 minutes. Her breathing remained even. Preston caught the movement. Nervous? He asked softly. She looked up. No. He smiled. You should be. He stepped away before she could respond. He wanted her unsettled. He wanted a reaction before 8. He needed proof the room was still his. 7:57 p.m. 3 minutes. The terrace now fully oriented toward Preston. Guests clustered closer, forming a loose semicircle. Phones appeared discreetly, ready to record the toast. The saxophone player slowed, sensing transition. Preston clinked his fork lightly against his glass. Testing. Ping. Clear. 7:58 p.m. 2 minutes. Naomi stood alone at the edge of the gathering circle now. Visible. Deliberately visible. Preston lifted his glass higher. Friends, he began, voice smooth, confident, carrying easily across marble and glass, tonight isn't just about love. It's about alignment. About choosing the right partner to build something unstoppable. His eyes flicked toward Naomi for half a second. Subtle. The crowd leaned in. Preston inhaled slowly. This was the line he had prepared. The one sharpened earlier, disguised as philosophy. And I also, he added, voice lowering slightly, want to thank the people who taught me what not to settle for. The words landed gently. Almost poetic. Almost subtle. But everyone understood. The air changed. Heads turned. Not dramatically. Just enough. Toward Naomi. She stood near the outer edge of the semicircle now. Emerald silk catching soft rooftop light. Still. Composed. Isolated. No one laughed this time. They didn't need to. The implication did the work. Preston let the silence linger. Too long. He was enjoying it. That's growth, he added lightly. Recognizing when someone can't run at your pace. A quiet exhale moved through the crowd. Second-hand discomfort. Someone shifted weight. A heel scraped faintly against marble. Naomi didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. The skyline glittered behind her like a silent audience. Preston felt bold. Invincible. He mistook silence for victory. Claire's hand tightened slightly on his arm, not warning, not restraint, just awareness. He continued. Not everyone is built for elevation, he said calmly. And that's okay. A small laugh escaped someone near the back. Too loud. Too eager. It died quickly. Because now the discomfort was visible. Preston's eyes flicked toward Naomi again. Searching. Hoping. For reaction. For embarrassment. For proof that he still had power over her. She held his gaze. Level. Unmoved. The room stretched thin. Like glass under pressure. A breeze crossed the terrace, lifting napkins, brushing against silk, stirring nothing else. No one sipped. No one whispered. This was the most uncomfortable moment of the night. Because humiliation, when dressed as wisdom, forces witnesses to choose sides. And most people choose safety. A junior associate coughed quietly. An investor adjusted his cufflink. Claire's smile began to strain at the edges. Preston mistook the silence again. He thought they were absorbing his brilliance. He thought he had landed the line perfectly. He didn't realize the room was waiting. Waiting for something to interrupt it. Waiting for oxygen. Naomi lowered her eyes, not in defeat. In calculation. Her hand slipped subtly toward her clutch. She did not rush. She did not react impulsively. She simply looked at the time. 7:59 p.m. The numbers glowed faintly against her screen. 1 minute. She inhaled once. Slow. Measured. Across from her, Preston prepared to close. To love, he declared, lifting his glass higher, voice rising in triumphant crescendo, to ambition and to never settling. Glasses lifted around the terrace. But fewer smiles this time. Because something invisible had shifted. And no one could name it. The saxophonist, sensing the cue, began to play softly beneath the toast. But the first note barely formed before. It stopped. Mid-breath. Mid-note. Cut. Not faded. Cut. The silence was violent. He looked around like someone reviewing an acquisition. His gaze moved once across the skyline. Then once across the crowd. And people felt seen in a way that made them uncomfortable. A whisper broke near the balcony. That's him. Another voice, lower. He's here? The words traveled quietly but quickly. Like voltage. One investor near the back straightened immediately, smoothing his jacket without realizing it. Another subtly stepped aside to clear a path. Preston felt it before he understood it. The shift. The recalibration. He forced a laugh, light, charming, unbothered. Well, he said loudly, as if welcoming an unexpected donor, I suppose that answers that question. A few uneasy chuckles followed. But they were thin. Because the man walking toward him wasn't smiling. Wasn't scowling either. Just calm. Controlled. Certain. Naomi had not moved. Not yet. Her back remained toward the elevator for one deliberate second longer than necessary. Then she turned. Slowly. Their eyes met across the terrace. No dramatics. No rushing embrace. Just recognition. A slight incline of his head. Respect exchanged without spectacle. That quiet exchange did more than any dramatic reunion could have. It established alignment. Preston stepped forward quickly, extending his hand before silence swallowed him. You must be Naomi's husband, he said brightly, voice polished back into place. Preston. Congratulations on making it. The man looked at the hand. Then at Preston. Then back at the hand. A beat too long. He shook it. Once. Firm. Controlled. I don't attend celebrations, he said evenly. The rooftop held its breath. I attend corrections. Silence. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't threatening. But it landed like a sealed envelope sliding across a table. Preston laughed again, slightly louder this time. Well, he replied, I'm not sure what needs correcting. The man's gaze drifted briefly toward the semicircle of investors. Recognition flickered across several faces. Not fear. Recognition. One older investor swallowed hard. Another lowered his phone discreetly. The three men who entered first had positioned themselves subtly along the terrace perimeter, not blocking exits, not crowding anyone, just present. Professional. Still. Claire stepped closer to Preston, her smile tightening. And you are? She asked, tone polite but strained. He didn't look at her. Names weren't the important part. Positions were. Preston felt the need to regain narrative. So, he continued smoothly, addressing the crowd, we were just finishing a toast. Perfect timing. A few forced smiles surfaced. But something was off. Because half the room was no longer looking at Preston. They were looking at the man standing beside Naomi. Evaluating. Calculating. One guest whispered quietly, isn't he? Don't, the other murmured back. Preston caught the whisper. His confidence wavered by a fraction. But he pressed forward. Well, he said, raising his glass again, determined not to relinquish control, since you're here, welcome. We were just discussing growth. Because he didn't yet know the connection. He didn't yet know whose capital had backed his largest deal. He didn't yet know whose signature sat behind the silent funding agreement that built his current valuation. He didn't yet know that the man standing in front of him had already read every contract he'd ever signed. And that ignorance was the only reason Preston was still smiling. For now. The rooftop was no longer a party. It was a hearing. No one announced it, but everyone felt it. Preston still stood in the center, glass in hand, smile fighting to remain intact. Claire's fingers pressed lightly against his arm, as if proximity alone could stabilize the moment. Naomi's husband did not raise his voice. He did not step closer aggressively. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Slowly. Deliberately. Every movement measured. A single folded document emerged. Clean. Crisp. Unrushed. Preston's smile thinned. "You mentioned growth," the man said calmly, eyes steady. "Let's discuss it." A faint breeze moved across the terrace, lifting the corner of the paper slightly. "You acquired Holbrook Logistics 18 months ago," he continued. The name hit like a stone in water. Several investors stiffened. That had been Preston's breakout move. The deal that shifted him from promising to powerful. Preston cleared his throat. "Yes," he said lightly. "A bold expansion." "Bold," the man repeated evenly. "It required bridge capital." A flicker crossed Preston's face. Small. Quick. Hidden, but not invisible. The man unfolded the document. "You received that capital through a private holding intermediary." Preston's grip tightened around his glass. "That's standard structuring," he replied smoothly. "Nothing unusual." The man nodded once. "Correct." Silence pressed closer. "However," he continued, eyes never leaving Preston's, "you failed to notice the controlling interest clause embedded in Section 4.3. A ripple moved through the crowd. Several guests shifted instinctively to get a clearer view of the paper. Preston laughed, too quickly. "That clause was renegotiated." "No," the man replied calmly. "It wasn't." He turned the document slightly outward, not for theatrics, but for visibility. Even from a distance, the signatures were unmistakable. Preston's signature. The intermediary seal. And beneath it, another name. Not widely advertised, but widely recognized in certain circles. A senior investor near the back inhaled sharply. Preston felt it now. The room tilting. "What are you implying?" he asked, voice tightening despite his effort to remain composed. "I'm not implying anything," the man said evenly. "I'm clarifying." He stepped half a pace closer, not invading space, simply anchoring the conversation. "The capital that allowed you to acquire Holbrook," he continued, "originated from my firm." The word firm was deliberate. Clean. The first investor didn't say anything. He simply checked his phone, nodded once toward Naomi's husband, and walked toward the elevator. The second followed. Then the third. Soft shoes against marble. Glasses placed down half-finished. Assistants whispering into phones. Preston blinked rapidly, like someone trying to refocus a blurred screen. "Hold on," he said, forcing a laugh. "Let's not be dramatic." No one responded. Claire's smile had vanished. She stepped closer to Preston, lowering her voice but not enough. "You said the funding was secured." "It is," Preston whispered sharply. "It's handled." Naomi's husband adjusted his cufflinks. "It was," he corrected calmly. The distinction landed like a verdict. Across the rooftop, the event coordinator quietly removed the engagement banner from the digital display. The looping congratulatory animation disappeared mid-glow. Guests avoided eye contact now. Not with Naomi. With Preston. Claire stared at him a long moment. Not angry. Assessing. Recalculating. "You didn't read the clause?" she asked quietly. Preston didn't answer. He couldn't. The rooftop that had felt like a throne 30 minutes earlier now felt exposed. Too open. Too bright. One by one, the remaining guests drifted toward the exit. No shouting. No spectacle. Just absence. Naomi finally moved. She didn't look at Preston. Didn't look at Claire. She simply walked toward the elevator. Her husband fell into step beside her, not leading, not following. Equal. As the doors closed, the skyline reflected in the mirrored interior, calm, untouched. Behind them, Preston stood alone under the hanging lights. And for the first time that night, the room did not belong to him. 3 months later, the rooftop party was no longer trending. But Naomi was. She stood beneath soft stage lights at a leadership summit, her name printed across a clean white backdrop beside the logo of her newly launched foundation, focused on funding women entrepreneurs overlooked by traditional investors. The applause wasn't loud. It was steady. Respectful. Earned. She spoke without theatrics. No reference to the party. No reference to humiliation. Just vision, structure, and forward motion. In the audience, executives took notes. Across the city, Preston's name circulated for different reasons. An audit. A stalled merger. Quiet investigations into financing structures he once bragged about. The invitation stopped. The calls slowed. Rooms that once opened for him now hesitated. Naomi stepped down from the stage to another round of calm applause. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because some people try to embarrass you in public. But the right partner doesn't raise his voice. He changes the room. Who really had the power, Preston or Naomi? Comment your answer below. Like this video if you felt the shift the moment the elevator doors opened. And subscribe for more cinematic stories of silent dominance and strategic wins.